When babies are born, make sure my thing is on. Yep. When babies are born, their sight is very, very blurry. They can distinguish large blocks of dark and light, which is why we often see babies staring at windows or at lights, and as their eyesight sharpens, at fans. But it takes almost a full year for a baby's eyesight to fully develop. Fortunately, the hearing for babies is fully developed within 20 weeks after conception. So babies navigate the world around them through sound rather than sight during their first months of life. Babies recognize their adults' voices first, those who are their caretakers. The adults who spend the most time with the baby, cuddling the infant and making eye contact, because yes, making eye contact with an infant is an important part of their development of sight. Those adults who spend that time are the people and talking with the child, those are the voices the infants know the best. Babies can pick their adults' voices out of a crowd. And when those of us who are not the parents hold the baby and speak to the child, we might notice that their little eyebrows squinch together. And they look kind of confused because they don't recognize our voice. And eventually, if they don't hear mom or dad's voice soon enough, they start to get upset, which is easily remedied by giving the child back to adult they recognize. Because when they hear their voice, they know they are safe. The same holds true for the critters in our lives. Cats know the voices of their staff. That is, the adults who claim to own them. Please, feel free to get that. Dogs recognize, the cats are calling. I'm sorry. Bring my food. But dogs recognize the voice and the smell of their owners. Horses will recognize the voice of the one who trained them. And in spite of popular assumptions, sheep also recognize the face and the voice of their caregiver, of their shepherds. We now know that sheep, who we once believed were remarkably stupid, are not. They have fully developed frontal cortexes, that is, frontal lobes. That means sheep have a whole lot more going for them than we originally thought possible. Now, Jesus said the sheep under his care knew his voice. Those listening to Jesus knew what he was talking about. Sheep and goats were raised by anyone who had enough land to have a few animals, because sheep and goats provided clothing, milk, and food for the people in the first century. So if you had room on your property, you had sheep and goats to make sure that you had what you needed to get by. Now, sheep grazed on pasture land and would move with a shepherd to that pasture land every day. And if they were fortunate enough, they would go into their pens out in the pasture land at the end of the day. Jesus and those listening to him in the first century knew that sheep would only follow the voice of their shepherd. And as long as sheep were within hearing distance of their shepherd, they would be safe. And at night, if anyone tried to break in to steal a sheep, the shepherd knew that the flock would raise a ruckus, because the sheep would not recognize the voice, the shape, or the face of the thief. Forgot to undo that. Now, growing up, most of us could pick our parents' voices out of a crowd. As we grew older, my guess is most of us developed selective hearing. We could hear our mother or father's voice, but we just chose not to listen. And that's appropriate when it comes to human development, because we all go through a stage of rebellion against those who raised us called individuation. So adults, I don't care how close we are to our children, they will reach an age where they decide to employ selective listening. And they will find a way to make their own path in the world. They will try things on their own. We hope they don't kill themselves in the process. But they want to do their things their way rather than ours. And selective hearing, it's a great way to rebel without having quite so much guilt. Oh, you said that to me? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, right. Well, we humans tend to develop selective hearing with Jesus' voice as well. We have a distinct way of rebelling against Jesus and God's way for the same reason we rebel against the adults in our lives. We want to do things our way. We want to explore and take control of our own lives. And we will recognize the voice of God, but sometimes we choose to selectively refuse to listen to God's voice. I think most of us are here because at one point in our lives we heard the voice of God. We have felt God speaking to us. Like I said to the kids, most of us do not literally hear God's voice in our ears. Most of us do not literally hear a voice in our heads that we say, oh God, but rather we feel God speaking to us. There's something going on inside of us that we know is not our own thinking. There's a sense of right and wrong inside of us that we know is greater than our own desires. We experience God's voice. We feel God's touch in our lives. And yet, we like to pretend we don't know that that's God's voice. We say things like, well, how do I know that's God's voice instead of my own wishful thinking? How can I distinguish God's voice from all the others? Well, friends, deep down in our hearts, we know when it's God speaking to us, because it brings us a challenge that we might not otherwise take on ourselves. It brings us a sense of joy and peace that defies whatever else is going on in our lives. It brings us a sense of contentment that lets us know that while we might be afraid to move forward, we also know that that is how we will best be fulfilled. We know what's right and wrong, but when we don't like what God is saying, we practice selective hearing. And when we're completely honest with ourselves, we know when we're trying to do our things our way rather than God's way. So we pretend to be confused. And sometimes we ignore God's voice for so long, we can forget what that voice sounds like. We can forget to pay attention to the voice of God that we find in our hearts and our souls. And when that happens, it's time to read the Gospels again. When that happens, it's time to pray until we run out of words so that we can listen. When that happens, it's time to pay attention to the voices of nature around us. Drive out to Point Beach State Forest in the evening and listen to the frogs, all the peepers. I defy you to listen to that and not say it's God speaking. When that happens, it's time to ask God to speak clearly in ways that even we can understand. When we forget what God sounds like, it's time to talk again with someone who knows us and who knows God really well. See, Jesus knew that we human beings would want to rebel. And Jesus knew that we would employ selective hearing. And I think that's why in John's Gospel, Jesus reminds us that we really are all like sheep. A little bit more about sheep. Sheep recognize the faces of their friends and prefer to stand near their friends. Remind anybody else of coffee time? Sheep recognize patterns in a maze. And if you take them away for a while, they'll come back and find their way through the maze again. Sheep know their ways in and out of home at night. Sheep recognize plants, and when they are sick, they will seek out the plant that will help them feel better. Sheep are smart enough to run away from danger. Sheep mothers will stay near their daughters when their daughters are giving birth. Sheep know the voice of the one who protects and guides them, the shepherd. And sheep know that sometimes they're going to put their heads down and follow grass until they're out of this too far away to hear the shepherd's voice. And when that happens, they know enough to just lay down and stay put until the shepherd comes to find them. And when the shepherd finds them, they know enough to stay there until the shepherd picks them up and carries them safely home. Some of us are in worship this morning because we know the voice of Jesus, and we are hungry to hear his voice in this place today. And some of us are here today because We frankly haven't heard Jesus' voice in a long time, and we hope that today we can grow quiet enough inside to hear the voice of our shepherd. Some of us are here because we've developed selective hearing, and we've rebelled against Jesus, we've rebelled against God, and we're here because we need the chance to confess and repent and hear his voice of forgiveness and love again. And some of us are here because a while back we just turned heel and walked away from Jesus. And we're here waiting and hoping that he will find us again and carry us back to safety. Jesus is speaking to us this morning through the voice of the sacrament of Holy Communion. And his voice through the sacrament, through the bread and the cup, reminds us that he loves us no matter what. Through the bread and the cup, his voice speaks of forgiveness and love and second chances. Jesus tells us to look around and find the faces of our friends and then join together to go into the world to find more lost sheep and welcome them into the fellowship. Jesus' voice reminds us to love one another as much as he loves each of us. Today we have the opportunity to open our hearts, to open our minds, to open our souls, to hear the voice of Jesus. We know his voice. And if we've never heard his voice before, we'll know it is Jesus when we feel that peace within us that passes all understanding. That peace that says whatever else is going on in our lives, we know that God is with us and it's going to be okay. We know it's Jesus' voice when we suddenly feel this bit of joy welling up within us, not because life is perfect, but because we know God is walking with us. We will know it is Jesus' voice when it's calling us to feel welcome and safe and loved. If we haven't listened to Jesus in a while, we'll recognize his voice like that of an old friend. Like babies, we'll know the voice of our caregiver when we hear it. And we can hear it today in the sacrament of Holy Communion. Amen.